Welcome to the Chairman's Podcast. I hope wherever you're listening from, you can put yourself at the foot of my chair and hear some stories by the crackling fire. Come relax every Monday morning as I release a new chapter from one of my novels. My hope is for you to find yourself entering into new worlds beyond your imagination. So sit back and warm yourself by the fire as I begin. This is Book 1, Tauno, Medric, and the Dragon's Will. Chapter 3, Just the Beginning. Ray and I turned from Lord Mao and began our descent of the hill. With the lake behind us now, and the sun shining on our necks, a massage of heat relaxes my unsteady thoughts. The dead pine needles littering the ground were coated with dew, and the dampness began to seep into my shoes. So, this Dragon Eye stuff? I asked cautiously. Ray kept on ahead of me, but turned and slowed down. For starters, I can say for certain that you're a Dragon's Eye user. What you should be asking is, what is the Dragon's Will? Okay, fine. What is the Dragon's Will? I say, mimicking Ray's voice, thus triggering the descent into her vast knowledge. It is the source of our abilities, a blessing given to some people by the dragon gods. No one knows exactly how people are selected. They just are. It's quite rare to be chosen. However, over time, we have formed a fairly large gathering. There are 4 academies in each corner of Keeladel, one for each Delrian province. From a young age, dragon wills are taught at these academies on how to control and wield their abilities. Dragons? I say in concern. You mean the gods are dragons? Yes, but some believe they're no longer with us, and that they traveled to the land of Exilius. The Exilius? Yes. Have you even looked at a map? The land beyond North and East Elra, a pale country, forsaken and destroyed. Ruins of an unearthly past lay in waste upon the snowy cliffed mountains. That's where the gods dwell. Believing this to be true, that is, no proof can be given, for any who travel to that land never return. And these abilities, what are they? My mind wanders as I envision the dark destruction that unfolded in Hawesville. Wielders of this dragon's will have always been a threat to the commoner. They are blessings given to us dragon wills, spread over the 5 classes. One can only obtain abilities within their class. So what you're saying is... That's enough for now. Ray sighed and stopped me there without further explanation. I know you want answers, and you'll have them in time. But for now, let me get some food, and then we can continue this interrogation while we eat. Thinking hard about what Ray had said so far, I found myself standing before a large building without realizing it. It was crafted from massive logs. As trees of old, I can only imagine their magnificence when they were still standing proud. Ray swung one of the 2 wooden doors open, and immediately the chatter and bustle of people came to ear. Stepping inside, I scanned the room and saw around 50 to 100 people, including the staff. They were rushing to and from their tables with plates of food. Following Ray closely, and keeping away from the pushing bodies, we found ourselves at the end of a small line. This is the line for food, so you know for future reference. She said this with a little nudge and wink. You know there's no guarantee I'm staying. One can only hope. Saying this much quieter, she looked away. In the corner of my eye, I saw her cheeks adopting a rosy hue. Suddenly, a faint warmth filled my chest. I quickly turned my attention elsewhere and watched the others as they grabbed their food ahead of us. After we made our way through the line, we turned back and headed to the crowded tables. I assume you'd rather sit alone? Ray spoke up over the din of the room. Well, I'd like to talk and have you explain things to me, but it's understandable if you'd rather sit with your friends. As we talked, a nearby table emptied and only one guy remained. He was cleaning up after some others, and stretching over the table, he fumbled around with some cups. The boy looked around our age, with short, thick blonde hair and hazel eyes. He wore a light gray shirt with a brown, weather-worn vest over top. Why don't we sit with Chris? He's nice. I think you two will get along well, Ray said as I walked over without any objections. As we came up to the table, Chris leaned back, stretching his bear-like arms across his bench. Ray! Chris shouts louder than necessary. Take a seat. There's enough room for the 3 of us. I warily sink into a spot on the bench that puts the most distance between Chris and myself, while Ray plunks down in the spot directly in front of him. Let me guess. Your boyfriend? I almost choked on my water after realizing that Chris was looking at me. He's not my boyfriend, Ray said with hasty fluster. But if you're going to treat us that way, then we'll take our company elsewhere. She grabs her tray and rises from the bench. Come on! I'm kidding. How mean do you think I am? I wouldn't want to put him through a relationship with you, he giggled to himself, then leaned over the table towards me and put his hand to the side of his mouth. Trust me, she's crazy. I'm not crazy. Ray lunged forward at Chris, spilling her drink in the process. After about a minute of mayhem, Ray calmed down and brushed her hair back away from her face. Her water had spilled across the table and soaked a part of her tray. Chris, who was still recovering from the recent bombardment, cautiously wiped up Ray's water and poured her a new glass. Now then, where were we? Ray said, as normal as ever. Oh yes! She tapped her forehead. Let us continue. She spoke as if trying to prove that she had regained her sanity. Maybe you could first introduce me properly. Chris spoke softly and hesitantly, as to not get another beating. Ah, of course. Where are my manners? Ray said considerately. This is Tauno. A sudden crack in Chris's facade appeared. You have manners? He blurts out and immediately surrenders himself to another attack. I had nearly finished my breakfast, and most of the lodge had emptied when Ray and Chris had finally exhausted themselves. Tauno? Chris, Tauno, she says through a heavy breath as she motions to us both. Tauno here is a newcomer. Nice to meet you, Chris, I say and extend my hand for a shake. It's nice to meet you, Tauno. Chris reaches out his hand shakily, as if he was a wounded dog. I'm sorry you have to see me like this, he says softly and hides his face. But what can a guy do? Lifting his head, his tone shifts slightly. If you're a newcomer at your age, you probably didn't learn much of us beforehand. His attitude was now the complete opposite and back to normal. Grabbing some water, he filled my cup and his own. No, I didn't. I've only somewhat grasped the idea of all this today. I see. And did Ray assist you in your unknowingness? He glances at her quickly, but Ray doesn't react. She sat quietly, eating her food. Oh, the cat just needed her tummy filled. Ray's eyes sharpened like daggers as she lifted her knife. Do you have a death wish? Ray's grip tightens around the knife as she grinds her teeth. Ah, yes. Why don't we give Tauno a demonstration? Chris laid his hand palm down on the table. Is the cat actually a little frightened kitten? Chris taunted. That's it. Don't blame me for this. As Ray spoke, she took the knife and thrust it through the hand of Chris, and the thud of it hitting the table below echoed in my ears. What? What? Oh my, you are freaks. I said this and flung my head down into the table and covered my neck with my hands. Please don't kill me. Just let me go home. Look what you did, Chris. Now he'll never want to stay. What I did? Chris spoke without any hint of pain or anguish. Ha! I thought you were bluffing, but I should have expected as much. Looking up cautiously, I could see Chris slowly pulling the knife from his hand. A feeling of lightheadedness came over me, and I hastily laid my head back down again. Chris, I said, muffled with my face against the table. Why are you guys like this? I moaned as Ray's hand pulled my head up to her shoulder. Tauno, open your eyes, Chris said blatantly. I'd rather not. Blood at the moment is a no-go for me. As a shiver ran through my spine, I began thinking about the darkness and the feeling of blood covering me. Fearing the void of my own thoughts, I opened my eyes and faced the light of reality, despite its present horrors. See, Tauno? No blood, Ray said softly in my ear. Jumping up, not sure if it was from the sight of Chris's healed hand or the fluster from being so close to a girl, I leaned against the table, closer to Chris. What happened? I say as I examine Chris's hand. My new friend. This is the Dragon's Claw, a class I have been blessed with. Ray here is a Dragon's Breath, Chris tells me as he rubs the mark on his hand, which has closed up on its own. Claw, breath, Dragon's Eye? What is all this? These are a few of the classes I was talking about earlier, Ray says as she twirls the bloody knife in her hand. There are 5 in total. Placing it on a napkin, she begins to finally explain herself. As a user of the Dragon's Will, there are 5 classes, and 1 is gifted to each Dragon's Will. The Dragon's Claw, Dragon's Breath, Dragon's Scale, Dragon's Soul, and lastly, the Dragon's Eye. Each has special abilities entitled to their class. Some grow on their own over time, some must be trained, but none show themselves unless your knowledge of the Dragon's Will advances first. And you believe I have the Dragon's Eye class? I prompt Ray. I do. Wait, Ray, Chris cuts in. You're telling me he's a Dragon Eye? Dragon's Eye, Ray corrected him. But yes, he is. I guess you are the one who would figure that out. Chris says thoughtfully. What does that mean, you figured it out? I ask Ray curiously. Well, I'm a Dragon's Breath user. This is the class blessed with magic, the ability to use spells and enchantments. Ray paused and watched my puzzled expression. Throughout my life, I have trained myself to use many spells. One of the spells allows me to determine which class dwells within a dragon's will. It was a spell once practiced by the mages of old. Using this spell helped me determine your class. So with this ability you found out I was a dragon's eye. Yep. And how accurate is this ability? I ask, doubtful of her skill and looking for a loophole out of this crazy place. Quite accurate. Also, you're the son of a dragon's eye, so if anyone is lucky enough to be one, it'd most likely be you. I guess that could make sense, I say, brushing off the pressing questions about my father. Now Chris, I say as I turn my attention to him, explain this healing of yours. What type of magic do you use? Your so-called dragon's claw? How did you heal so fast? Curiosity was beginning to swell within me. It may have been too obvious, because Chris began to smile with pleasure as I questioned him. You see, as a dragon's claw, my abilities are on a completely different spectrum than Ray's. Although our abilities are fewer than the endless options of a dragon's breath or dragon's scale, we are gifted with rapid healing, skin as hard as a dragon's hide, and strength to match. Also the knowledge and mastery over weapons of war. Then, why, if your skin is as hard as a dragon's hide, did this tiny metal knife pierce you so easily? Ray scoffed, although I too had the same question. Well, these abilities, like the other classes, take time to form. Since I'm no master yet, my abilities are still quite weak. But if I take this knife again... Chris picked up the knife and brought it towards his other arm. In a quick and clean slash, the blade glanced off his skin. You see, a weak blade like this can pierce me if stabbed with enough force. But even a slash of a sharpened sword would ricochet off my skin if the angle was off by a fraction. Heed a word of warning. Enchanted weapons or blades of great craftsmanship are more adequate for striking through a dragon's claw's hide. Chris set down the knife and sat back looking rather pleased with his explanations. This is a lot to take in, I say as I rub my forehead. But putting this all aside, I'd like different answers now. Curiosity had filled me and I wanted to learn more. I don't know if you two can give me them, but I want to know more about my father. End of Chapter 3. Thank you for listening, and come back next Monday for Chapter 4, Veldor Medric.